The moment I realized I was disposable didn't come quietly. It happened on a cold Friday night in downtown Chicago, the kind where the wind cuts through you no matter how expensive the building is. It came dressed in velvet lights, champagne bubbles, and a smile that used to belong to me. I still remember standing outside the venue, staring at my reflection in the glass doors, asking myself why my hands were shaking. I told myself it was just nerves. Just old feelings resurfacing. Just one conversation, then I'd leave. Closure, that's what I called it. Like closure was something you could schedule between drinks. Inside, everything smelled expensive. Polished wood. Fresh flowers. Money. The kind of upscale rooftop venue you only see in big US cities, where valet tickets matter more than names. Polished wood. Fresh flowers. Money. The kind of place where even the air feels like it costs extra to breathe. I adjusted my jacket, the same one I'd worn to 3 interviews that went nowhere across Chicago's loop, and followed the sound of laughter. That's when I saw her. She was glowing. Not the soft, familiar glow I remembered from lazy Sundays and shared dreams, but something sharper. Brighter. Like she'd been polished too. And beside her stood a man I didn't recognize, his hand resting comfortably at her lower back, like it belonged there. I knew before anyone said a word. The banner behind them confirmed it anyway. Gold letters. Her name. His name. Engagement celebration. My stomach dropped, slow and heavy, like an elevator with a snapped cable. She saw me a second later. Our eyes met. Just for a beat. I expected shock. Guilt. Something human. Instead, she smiled. She walked over like this was all perfectly normal. Like she hadn't once promised forever in a cramped apartment while we counted coins for groceries. "I'm glad you came," she said, casual, like this was just another stop on her night. Glad. I nodded, because that's what men do when they don't know what else to do. We nod. We swallow. We survive. She gestured to the man beside her. "This is Ryan," she said, "the way you introduce someone you've already moved on with." Ryan extended his hand. His watch caught the light. I shook it automatically. His grip was firm, confident. A man who'd never had to rehearse apologies in his head. "Nice to meet you," he said, easy and confident, like first impressions had always worked out for him. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled. She leaned in, lowered her voice. "I hope this doesn't hurt you," she said, lowering her voice like she was doing me a favor. That was when I felt it. The final crack. The soundless one. I took a breath. "You invited me." She shrugged. "I thought you'd want to see how things turned out." There was. The unspoken sentence finished in my head. How things turned out for me. The music swelled behind us. Glasses clinked. Someone cheered. Life went on, violently indifferent. "I made a practical choice," she said, like she was explaining a budget decision, not ending a life we built. "I hope you understand." Practical. A word that had followed me for years like a quiet accusation. Practical job. Practical salary. Practical future. I looked at her ring. It wasn't subtle. Nothing about it was. "Yeah, congratulations," I said, forcing the words out like they owed me money. She smiled again. Then she said it. "Enjoy poverty," she said flatly, no anger in it at all, just certainty. No anger. No venom. Just certainty. The kind that comes from never having to worry again. Something inside my chest folded in on itself. I felt heat rush to my face, then drain just as fast. I was suddenly very aware of my shoes, scuffed, cheap. Of the way my jacket didn't quite fit right anymore. Of every bill waiting for me at home. I nodded once. That was all I trusted myself to do. I walked away before she could say anything else. Before I broke in front of people who didn't know me and didn't care. Outside, the night air hit me like a slap. Lake Michigan wind, sharp and unforgiving, cutting through my jacket like it knew I didn't belong anywhere warm anymore. I sucked in a breath and realized my lungs were burning, like I'd been underwater too long. I walked. I didn't know where. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from my bank. Low balance warning. Rent due in 4 days. I laughed. A short, hollow sound that startled a couple walking past. I sat on the curb, head in my hands, replaying the moment over and over. Her smile. His watch. That sentence. Enjoy poverty. It echoed louder than any insult I'd ever heard. I'd spent years believing love was enough. That ambition would catch up. That things would work out if I kept my head down and did the right thing. Turns out, belief doesn't pay rent. As I stood up, the world tilted. Just slightly. I blinked, steadying myself. Probably stress, I told myself. Probably hunger. Probably pride finally rotting from the inside. I made it halfway down the block before my vision blurred again. For a split second, I wondered if this was what rock bottom felt like. Not dramatic, not loud, just quietly losing your balance while everyone else kept dancing. I leaned against a wall until the dizziness passed. Somewhere behind me, music spilled into the street. Celebration. Applause. I walked away from it all, not knowing that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment everything I thought I knew about myself started to break. And I had no idea how deep that break would go. By the next morning, the sentence was still there. Enjoy poverty. It sat in my head like a tab I couldn't close, replaying itself every time I blinked. I woke up on my couch, because the bed still smelled like her, and stared at the cracked ceiling of my one-bedroom apartment on the south side, listening to the radiator knock like it was reminding me I was late on something again. I checked my phone before my feet hit the floor. Old habit. Maybe an email. Maybe a callback. Maybe proof that my life hadn't officially stalled out. Nothing. Just another rejection from a company that thanked me for my interest and wished me luck like luck was something you could afford to wait for. I sat there longer than I should have, doing the math in my head. Utilities. Student loans. Groceries. The numbers never worked unless I pretended something wouldn't need to be paid. That's when I realized how long I'd been living like that, pretending. I'd spent years telling myself I was on my way. That my career was just taking the scenic route. That stability would come eventually, as long as I kept grinding. But eventually is a dangerous word when you're in your 30s. I showered, dressed, and put on the version of myself that looked employable. Button-down shirt, clean jeans, shoes that still had some life left in them. I practiced my smile in the mirror. The one that said I was capable, reliable, worth investing in. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mom. "Hey," she said when I answered. "Just checking in." I knew that tone. Concern wrapped in casual conversation. "I'm good," I said automatically. There was a pause. "Are you still looking?" "Yeah." Another pause. Longer this time. "You know," she said carefully, "maybe it's time to think about something more stable." Stable. There it was again. The word that meant less than what you hoped for. "I am thinking about it," I said, trying to keep my voice even. After we hung up, I sat in my car outside a coffee shop I couldn't afford anymore and watched people walk in with laptops, purpose, confidence. Everyone looked like they were going somewhere. I felt like I was standing still while the world passed me by. The interview was downtown, in a glass building that reflected the skyline back at itself like it was proud. I sat across from a hiring manager half my age who nodded a lot and asked if I saw myself here long-term. I almost laughed. "Yes," I said. "Absolutely." When I walked out, I already knew. By the time I got home, the exhaustion hit me all at once. Not the physical kind. The deeper one. The kind that comes from constantly proving you're not falling behind, while knowing you are. I thought about her. About Ryan. About how easily he fit into her future. I wondered when I'd stopped fitting into my own. That night my dad called. "You all right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." He hesitated. "You ever think about where you want to be in 5 years?" I stared at the wall. "All the time." "Well," he said, not unkindly, "thinking isn't the same as getting there." After we hung up, I sat in the dark, letting that land. For the first time, I let myself ask the question I'd been avoiding. What if she didn't leave because she stopped loving me? What if she left because I stopped becoming someone? As I stood up, a wave of dizziness hit me. Harder than before. The room tilted, my vision narrowing like someone was pulling a curtain closed. I grabbed the counter until it passed, my heart pounding like I'd sprinted upstairs. I told myself it was stress. that it was normal, that I'd sleep it off. But as I lay back down on the couch, staring at the ceiling again, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was wrong. Something deeper than money. And for the first time since she walked away, the fear wasn't about being broke. It was about not knowing what was happening to me at all. The third time it happened, I couldn't explain it away anymore. I was sitting in a narrow lobby downtown, knees bouncing, resume folder pressed flat against my thigh like it could anchor me. The place smelled like burnt coffee and printer ink. A TV on the wall played muted financial news. Markets up, opportunities everywhere, just not for me. My name was called. I stood up, and the floor shifted. At first it felt like vertigo, the kind you get when you stand too fast. Then the room started folding inward. Sounds stretched. Faces blurred. I remember grabbing for the edge of the receptionist's desk and missing it by inches. The next thing I knew, I was staring at fluorescent lights. Someone was saying my name. Someone else was asking if I could hear them. I tried to answer, but my mouth felt slow, like it wasn't taking orders anymore. "Sir, stay still," a woman said. Professional. An EMT knelt beside me. "You have any medical conditions we should know about?" "No," I said. Or tried to. The word came out softer than I expected. They helped me onto a stretcher while people pretended not to stare. I caught my reflection in the elevator doors on the way down, pale, eyes unfocused, tie crooked like it had given up before I did. At the hospital, time blurred into paperwork and beeping machines. Blood pressure. Heart rate. Questions I'd answered 100 times already. Any history of fainting? No. Chest pain. Just pressure. Family history of heart issues? Not that I know of. That last part felt strange as soon as I said it. They ran tests. Then more tests. An EKG. Blood work. A CT scan I hadn't planned on paying for. A doctor finally came in, late 40s, tired eyes, Chicago accent softened by years of bad news delivery. "Your vitals stabilized," he said, flipping through a tablet. "But some of these results don't line up the way we'd expect for someone your age." I swallowed. "What does that mean?" "It means we're not jumping to conclusions yet," he said. "But I'd like to dig a little deeper." I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting cracks to keep my hands from shaking. He asked me about my childhood. Birth records. Past surgeries. Allergies. "Were you adopted?" he asked casually, like it was just another box to check. "Yes," I said. I hadn't thought about it in years. It had never mattered. His eyes paused on the screen. Just for a second. Long enough for me to notice. "Do you have access to your original medical records?" "I don't think so," I said. "My parents said everything important was handled." He nodded slowly. "We're going to request a few things. Routine. Just to be safe." When he left, I sat there alone, listening to the hum of the building. Hospitals have a way of shrinking you. Stripping you down to data and waiting. I texted my mom to let her know where I was. She called immediately. "What happened?" she asked. "I passed out," I said. "They're running tests." There was a pause. Too long. "They'll figure it out," she said finally. "You always were sensitive." Sensitive. Another word that felt like a dodge. After we hung up, I lay back and closed my eyes. I thought about how my body had carried me through everything so far, long nights, skipped meals, stress I pretended didn't exist. I'd ignored it every time it tried to tell me something. A nurse came in with more forms. Consent forms. Insurance forms. One page caught my eye. Under medical history, a section was already filled in. Conditions I didn't recognize. I pointed. "What's that?" She frowned. "That's odd." She stepped out to check. When the doctor came back, his tone had changed. Still calm, but more careful. "We cross-referenced your information with an old emergency donor registry," he said. "There are discrepancies." "Discrepancies how?" He hesitated. "Records that suggest prior monitoring. Follow-ups that don't appear in your current file." My chest tightened. "Are you saying something's wrong with me?" "I'm saying there's more history here than we have access to," he replied. "And I don't think it's something you caused." That night, they admitted me for observation. Lying in that bed, for tape to my arm, I felt something shift. Not just fear. Vulnerability. For the first time, my body wasn't something I could push through on willpower alone. Whatever was happening had been waiting a long time. And it wasn't done with me yet. Hospitals have a way of stretching time. Morning came in thin strips of light through half-closed blinds, the kind that makes everything look unfinished. I'd slept maybe an hour. Every time I closed my eyes, my chest tightened, waiting for my body to betray me again. A nurse checked my vitals just after 6. Polite. Efficient. She didn't say much, but she lingered a second longer than necessary, like she was trying to decide whether to say something she wasn't supposed to. "Doctor will be in soon," she said. Soon turned into almost an hour. When he finally arrived, he wasn't alone. There was another doctor with him. Older. Silver hair. Glasses perched low on his nose. The kind of man who looked like he'd been doing this long enough to know when things weren't routine. "Good morning," the first doctor said. "How are you feeling?" "Like I shouldn't be here," I replied. He gave a half smile. "That's understandable." They pulled the curtain closed. That small sound, the soft scrape of plastic rings on metal, felt louder than it should have. "We've been reviewing your records," the older doctor said, folding his hands. "And requesting others." I nodded. "Okay. There are gaps," he continued. "Not uncommon with older adoption cases. But there are also annotations." "Annotations?" "Notes," he clarified. "Follow-ups. Monitoring schedules." My stomach tightened. Monitoring for what? He didn't answer right away. He looked at the younger doctor, then back at me. "Before we go further," he said, "we need your consent to request sealed files." "From where?" "A private medical foundation that no longer operates publicly." That sentence landed wrong. Like a door I didn't know existed suddenly cracking open. "Why would my records be there?" I asked. "That's what we're trying to understand," he said. I signed the form with a hand that didn't feel like mine. A few hours later, my parents arrived. Seeing them in that room, my dad standing stiff near the window, my mom clutching her purse like it might float away, made everything feel smaller. Heavier. My mom hugged me too tight. "You scared us," she said. "I scared myself," I replied. We sat. No one spoke for a while. Finally, I asked the question I'd been circling since yesterday. "Is there anything about my adoption I should know?" My mom's eyes flicked to my dad. He exhaled slowly. "We promised we wouldn't talk about it unless you asked." "I'm asking." She sat down hard in the chair. "We were told it was better if you didn't know," she said. "That it would complicate things." "Complicate what?" "Your life," she said softly. The doctor stepped in gently. "Some of the records suggest your early care involved specialized monitoring." My dad cleared his throat. "We were young," he said. "They told us you were healthy. That the rest was precaution." Precaution. Another word people use when they don't want to tell the truth. Later that afternoon, the results came back. Not answers. Clues. The older doctor sat at the foot of my bed, tablet in hand. "Your genetic markers don't fully align with the records we have on file," he said. "Which means at some point, information was intentionally separated." "Separated how?" "Your identity was protected," he said carefully. "For reasons that weren't medical." I felt my pulse in my throat. "Are you saying someone hid who I was?" "I'm saying," he replied, "that someone went to great lengths to keep parts of your history sealed." When my parents left that evening, the room felt emptier than before. I stared at the ceiling, trying to connect dots that refused to line up. Adoption. Monitoring. A foundation that vanished. I wasn't just missing information. Someone had decided I shouldn't have it. That night, a nurse slipped an envelope onto my tray. "Someone asked that this be delivered to you," she said. It came through administration. Inside was a single page. Mostly redacted. Except for one repeated name at the bottom. A name I didn't recognize. But the way my chest tightened told me I was supposed to. Whatever that file was, it had been following me longer than she ever had. And I was finally close enough to touch it. They discharged me 2 days later with more questions than answers and a stack of paperwork thick enough to qualify as its own diagnosis. "Take it easy," the doctor said as he handed me the folder. No heavy stress. No pushing yourself. I almost laughed. Stress had been my full-time job. Outside, the city felt louder than it used to. Sirens in the distance. The rumble of the L overhead. People moving with purpose while I stood still on the sidewalk, holding a version of myself that no longer fit. I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly, letting the streets decide for me, until I ended up parked along the lake. Gray water. Gray sky. Chicago in its most honest mood. I opened the envelope again. The redactions were thick, aggressive, like someone had taken a marker to my life and decided what I wasn't allowed to see. Dates were missing. Names blocked out. But the structure was there. Patterns of checkups, long-term monitoring, specialists flown in from out of state. This wasn't precaution. This was preparation. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Hello. Is this you? A man asked. Older. Controlled. The kind of voice that never rushed. Yes. My name is Daniel Cross, he said. I'm calling regarding your recent medical evaluation. I leaned back in the seat. How did you get this number? That's a fair question, he said. I represent a private trust connected to your early care. There it was again. That phrase. What do you want? I asked. To talk, he replied. In person. At your convenience. Silence stretched between us. I'm not agreeing to anything, I said. Of course not, he said calmly. This isn't an obligation. It's an explanation. He gave me an address downtown. An office I'd driven past 100 times without noticing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory suddenly felt unreliable. My childhood. My parents' reassurances. The idea that I was ordinary. Especially that last one. I kept thinking about her. About how easily she'd dismissed me. How confident she was that she'd chosen right. For the first time, the thought didn't sting the same way. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like misalignment. The next morning, I stood outside the building Daniel had mentioned. Clean lines. No signage. Security that didn't look like security. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel Cross was waiting. Mid-60s. Tailored suit. Eyes that measured before they spoke. Thank you for coming, he said, extending a hand. I didn't take it right away. You should know, I said, I'm not interested in money. A corner of his mouth lifted. That's usually how I know I'm talking to the right person. He gestured for me to sit. There's no easy way to say this, he began. So I won't try. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were test results. Genetic charts. Names I'd never heard. One family name that kept appearing. Your biology places you within a very small lineage, he said. One that made a decision decades ago to remove a child from public visibility. My chest tightened. Why? Because power attracts pressure, he said. And pressure breaks people. I pushed the folder back. This doesn't change who I am. No, he agreed. But it explains why you were protected from becoming someone else. I stood up. I didn't ask for this. No, he said again. But it's yours. As I left the building, my phone lit up with a notification. The photo of her. Engagement shoot. Smiling. Certain. I stared at it for a moment. Then I turned the phone face down. For the first time, I wasn't tempted to prove anything. I just needed to decide who I was going to be, now that I knew someone had once tried to decide for me. The offer didn't arrive with fireworks. It came the way everything serious does, quietly, carefully, wrapped in language that sounded reasonable enough to be dangerous. Daniel called 2 days after our meeting. I was at home, sitting at the small kitchen table that doubled as my desk, staring at a rejection email I hadn't bothered to delete. They'd like to move forward, he said. Who's they? I asked, even though I already knew. The trustees, he replied. Access to resources. Medical oversight. Legal insulation. A safety net most people never know exists. I leaned back in my chair and looked around the apartment. The chipped counter. The second-hand couch. The silence. What's the catch? I asked. There's no catch, he said. Then, after a beat, There's responsibility. He explained it in pieces. How my condition, still undefined, still unfolding, had been monitored since infancy. How my biological family had decided privacy was the only way to give me a chance at something resembling normal. How stepping into their world now would mean accepting structure, oversight, and a version of myself that came with expectations. You wouldn't want for anything, Daniel said. You'd never worry about money again. The line landed exactly where she'd aimed hers. Enjoy poverty. I closed my eyes. For a moment I let myself imagine it. The relief. The ease. Bills paid without math. Doctors who answered calls. Doors opening without me having to knock. It would have solved everything. And taken something with it. When do they need an answer? I asked. There's no rush, he said. But clarity helps everyone. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. Long enough for the afternoon light to fade and the city to soften outside my window. I thought about all the times I'd felt invisible. All the moments I'd measured myself against numbers, salary, savings, potential, and come up short. This was a chance to flip the scale. But it didn't feel like winning. The next morning, I met Daniel again, this time at a private clinic north of the city. Efficient. Too calm. A specialist walked me through projections. Risk factors. Lifestyle adjustments. Everything spoken gently, like they were already assuming my compliance. You'd be well taken care of, she said. I nodded. Asked questions. Took notes. All the while, a single thought kept cutting through the noise. If I say yes, who do I become? After the appointment, Daniel and I walked out together. You don't seem convinced, he said. I'm not, I replied. He stopped near the door. You're not choosing between pride and security, he said. You're choosing between uncertainty and support. I've lived with uncertainty, I said. I know what it costs. And yet, I said, I'm still here. That night my dad called. Your mom told me about the doctors, he said. About the rest. I waited. We did what we thought was right, he said. We wanted you to have a normal life. I know, I said. And I meant it. There was a pause. Whatever you decide, he added, make sure it's yours. I slept better than I had in weeks. The decision came the next morning, quietly, over coffee that tasted burnt and familiar. I called Daniel. I'm not stepping into it, I said. He didn't argue. May I ask why? Because I've spent too long letting other people decide what I'm worth, I replied. I'm not outsourcing that again. Another pause. Respect this time. If you change your mind, he said, the door remains open. I know, I said. When the call ended, nothing dramatic happened. No surge of triumph. No fear. Just a steady sense of alignment. For the first time in a long while, the choice I made wasn't about escaping who I was. It was about standing inside it. And somewhere beneath the uncertainty, I felt something solid taking shape. Not wealth. Direction. I didn't plan to run into her. That's the thing about closure, it never shows up on schedule. It happens when you're buying groceries you can barely afford or waiting for a crosswalk light you've missed twice already. I was in line at a neighborhood market, the kind with uneven floors and handwritten signs, when I heard my name. Not shouted. Not rushed. Just familiar. I turned and there she was. She looked the same and different all at once. Better dressed. More polished. But there was a tension around her eyes I didn't remember. Like someone holding a breath they didn't know how to release. Hey, she said. Hey. We stood there, two people pretending this wasn't strange. She glanced at my basket, eggs, bread, coffee. Ordinary things. I wondered if she was disappointed. You look good, she said. So do you. She nodded, then hesitated. I heard you were in the hospital. Yeah, I said. I'm okay. She studied my face like she was looking for cracks. I was worried, she said. I believed her. That surprised me. We stepped aside to let someone pass, ended up near the window. Sunlight cut across the floor between us, clean and unforgiving. I didn't mean what I said, she said suddenly. I knew which word she meant. I know, I replied. She exhaled. I was angry. And scared. And tired of waiting. I get that. Her brows pulled together. Do you? Yes, I said. I really do. She searched my face again, then asked the question I'd been expecting. Are you okay? I mean, financially. There was care disguised as curiosity. I'm managing, I said. She tilted her head. That doesn't sound like you. I smiled, small. People change. Silence settled between us, not uncomfortable. Just final. I thought leaving would push you, she said quietly. Force you to become more. I looked at her then really looked. You don't get to motivate someone by abandoning them, I said. Not angry. Just true. Her eyes widened slightly. She nodded once. I guess I wanted certainty, she said. And he offered that. I know. She waited, like there was more coming. There isn't, I added. I'm not angry. I'm not trying to prove anything. She frowned. Then what are you doing? Building a life I can stand inside, I said. The cashier called the next customer. Time nudged us forward. I'm glad you're okay, she said. So am I. As I walked out, I didn't look back. Not because it hurt. Because it didn't. Outside the air felt lighter. Not because things were easy, but because they were honest. For the first time since she left, I wasn't carrying her words with me. I was carrying my own. The first thing I noticed wasn't relief. It was quiet. Not the empty kind, the kind that used to make me anxious, but a steadier silence. Like something inside me had stopped arguing. Life didn't suddenly get easier after that last conversation. My bank balance didn't jump. My inbox didn't fill with offers. I still woke up some mornings counting hours instead of dreams. But I stopped measuring myself the way I used to. I found work that wasn't glamorous but was honest. Consulting. Short-term contracts. Helping small businesses clean up messes bigger companies ignored. It paid enough. Sometimes just enough. And for the first time in a long time, that felt okay. I kept my doctor appointments. Learned the language of my own body. Learned when to slow down instead of pushing through. No one was watching anymore. That turned out to be the point. I'd spent years performing adulthood, trying to look stable, desirable, successful, while quietly panicking that I was falling behind some invisible schedule. Now, there was no audience. Just me showing up. One night, I walked along the lake after work. Same gray water. Same skyline. Different weight in my chest. I thought about how close I'd come to letting someone else define me again, this time with nicer language and better benefits. Security is seductive. But so is self-respect. I understood something then that no diagnosis or offer could teach me. Poverty had taken comfort. It had taken certainty. It had taken pride. But it had never taken my ability to choose. That had always been mine. I thought about her, briefly. Not with anger. Not with regret. Just acknowledgement. She made the best decision she could with the values she had. So did I. The difference was, I finally knew mine. I stopped chasing the version of myself that impressed people who didn't know me. I started building a life that felt quiet when I lay down at night. And that was worth more than anything I'd been offered. Some mornings are still hard. Some doubts still show up uninvited. But now, when they do, I don't ask how much I'm worth. I ask whether I can stand behind my choices. Most days I can. That's how I know I'm not poor anymore. Not in the ways that matter.